Hi there, welcome to Chicago. Glad to have you with us. For the next hour, we're talking all sorts of Big Ten sports. Mike Hall and Dave Wannstedt. It's Big Ten Today presented by Gatorade. Great to see you.
It's great to be back. Absolutely. It's that time of year.
Officially back. Fall is here.
Officially back. What we used to say, no turning back now, Mikey. Here we go, buddy.
Dave's going to be with us all show long and thankfully all fall long as we talk football all season long. It's not technically fall, I suppose. We're still in mid-August. We got some 80 degrees left. But we're getting ready for football. And we're going to start off this show with our big story, and that is just the season in general, kind of the big picture notes. We found out the AP poll the other day. Top 25 teams include 3 Big Ten squads in the top 7 nationally. 2 more ranked in the top 25. And oh, by the way, 3 teams that'll be in the Big Ten next year are in the top 20 as well. 4 squads have new head coaches, and only 2 teams returned a full-time starting quarterback from last year. So we're going to dive deep into the head coaches in just a little bit, but kind of big picture stuff. What is it you're most excited about to see happen this fall in the football?
Boy, that last stat you gave there, only 2 returning starting quarterbacks. I mean, that's what you're into now, obviously, around the country with the transfer portal. So to see how these transfer quarterbacks and players work out, some of them have been great successes, and some of them really have been disappointments. So I think you got to follow that real close. But this is an exciting time of year. You know what's fun this time? All the coaches are sitting there, and what they're saying is, God, our guys, we're faster than we were last year.
Right.
And we're stronger than we were last year. We're smarter than we were. I mean, and that's the excitement that they have. And the coaches, a lot of these coaches are new, which we'll talk about in a minute, but the assistants, a lot of the assistant coaches have added responsibilities. So there's an excitement there that they've got some new ideas, and whether it's new drills and things that they're going to be bringing to the table. And then from the fans, Mike, I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, every fan, whether your team finished first or last, they have a renewed belief for this week, and a renewed energy. And I think that's what's so great about college football.
And I think Big Ten specifically, nothing feels guaranteed. Like, there are years where you're like, well, it's probably going to be Ohio State's year to win it all, or this team's, Wisconsin's definitely winning the West Division. Man, there could be 3 teams out east, all powers, that could win it, and the West, I could make a great argument for Iowa, a great argument for Wisconsin, a great argument for Illinois. Like, everything feels like we'll know more halfway through the season, but we don't have a clue right now.
Absolutely, and looking at that, how many teams were ranked, my first thought was, because the Big Ten is expanding, we're kind of the national team. All of a sudden, people look at the conference as strong as it was, stronger than any. Now they look at it and they say, boy, the Big Ten, so they're going to give you a little bit more love maybe than what they were, as the Southeast Conference was getting it all. Really.
For sure.
So our teams, deservingly so, and our coaches and players, I think, will be in the spotlight a lot more going forward.
Alluding to what I mentioned earlier, USC will be in the Big Ten next year. They're ranked in the top 10. Oregon and Washington both in the top 20 this year. So it will be a much stronger conference next year. And we're going to get Dave's thoughts a little bit later on the show, kind of big picture, what he thinks of the news about Oregon and Washington making the Big Ten 18. But for now, one of the things we showed you on that graphic was the new head coaches. Here's a look at their faces. These are the 4 guys. David Braun in an interim manner in Evanston. Luke Fickell taking over in Madison. Matt Rule trying to rebuild his 3rd program in a row in the college ranks in Lincoln. And Ryan Walters, his first job as a head coach in West Lafayette. We're going to go one by one, break these down, and get your idea as a longtime successful head coach on each of them. I want to start off with arguably the biggest name and the biggest, maybe not biggest surprise, but I didn't see it coming. Luke Fickell, leaving a Cincinnati program he took to the playoffs just a year ago, to take over a Wisconsin program that, listen, their 30-year run of being successful has been amazing, but it's always kind of been a similar format, and he's going to try to spruce things up a little bit.
Yeah, the old quote, perception is reality. Well, with Wisconsin, I would tell Wisconsin fans, the perception is not reality, because the perception is just what you said, Mike. From Barry Alvarez to Bielema to Paul Chryst, it's been, we're going to lead the league in possession time, and we're going to run the ball and play great defense. Well, now all of a sudden they hire Luke, and he comes in with a different offensive philosophy. And we can see that what he did at Cincinnati, a little more open. And he hires Phil Longo from North Carolina. If you look close at Phil Longo's stats, the 3 years he led the ACC in rushing as well as passing. So my point is that they're going to be balanced, which I think they need to be. But this is not a.
It's not an air raid.
It's not.
That's the phrase being thrown around. It's not an air raid.
It's not an air raid. They're going to be balanced because don't lose sight of this, Wisconsin fans. Your head coach is a defensive-minded coach. And defensive-minded coaches, they have an appreciation for running the ball, how it helps your defense, and how it helps the overall mentality of your team. So I really like, he's got a great staff. I mean, you got Tressel's, son in there, and you got Jack Bicknell Jr. coaching the offensive line. He's a great line coach. I mean, he's put together a great staff. And they're going to open it up more, and it's going to be good for Wisconsin.
And they do have Braylon Allen as a running back coming back, who's already a star. You think about the last 20 years, what was the best year of Badger football? When Russell Wilson was their quarterback. And they were balanced because they had a great passing attack and a great running attack. We'll see if they can find that balance in year one in just a few weeks. I mentioned Matt Rule taking over in Lincoln. He's rebuilt a program in Temple. He's rebuilt a program in Baylor. What has to happen for him to be able to rebuild the Huskers?
Yeah, that's his reputation. I've known Matt, for a long time. In fact, when I was the head coach at Pitt, he was the head coach at Temple. So we would go to clinics together and we would talk football back and forth. And you're right, he turned Temple around, to get him winning 10 games. He did the same thing with Baylor. The one thing that Matt has going, he's a great recruiter. And really, we can't lose sight that Nebraska with Scott Frost, they were so close to winning so many games, Mike, right? I mean, how many of them were one-score games or they lost it in the last? And you lose them. But, I think that Matt Rule, he's got his staff. These guys have been together. He doesn't have to spend time coaching coaches. These guys have all been with him, the majority of them, for a while. So he's going to come in hitting the ground running. And I think that they're going to find ways to win some of these closer games. And I think it's going to be a better year than what people were anticipating. I really do.
That's an interesting angle to take on Rule because you look at the recruitings under Frost, most were pretty good. A lot of top 25 classes. So there has been talent coming in. You get a handful of those close games to swing your way this year. It might be I'm not saying you're going to get a 10-win team this year, but it could be better than people are expecting.
Yeah, I think it's it's going to add strength to that western side of the conference, which obviously I think is a positive. So in the fan base out there, I mean, you talk about, I've played there, okay? When I was at Pitt, I played out there. When I was at Oklahoma State, and that's not an easy place to play. And these fans are going to be excited, and I look for really good things at a faster pace than people think at Nebraska.
They are a thirsty fan base for a winner. Haven't had a winning season since 2016. Our third coach to get to is brand new to the position. It's Ryan Walters. Spent the last couple years at Illinois, where their defense was top 10 every year. Before that, he was at Missouri. It was a top 10 defense there. I mean, he was one of the hot shot young coaches and now got his head coaching job. And it's kind of interesting, Dave, because going back to Joe Tiller, the history of Purdue head coaches have been offensive-minded guys. Every single one. This one's a defensive guy. What do you think about the fit?
Yeah, the ghost of Jeff Brom will be there. There's you can't hide from that. But you know what I would tell Ryan, if I was talking to him right now, I would say, Chuck Noll, the late Chuck Noll from the Steelers, we were playing golf once when I became a head coach of the Bears, my first job, just like him. It's all relative. I was a defensive guy. And he said two things. Never lose sight of why you got this job. Why did you get the job? Because of your defensive expertise. There's going to be a lot of cracks in the dike that you got to patch up, sure, but you focus on that defense. And then the second thing he told me, all these offensive coordinators that you hire, they're all going to tell you that they believe in running the ball and they want to run the ball. Very few of them do. So when you hire an offensive coordinator and you're a defensive coach, you better make sure that he does believe in running the ball and the importance of it. So that's what I would tell Ryan. Don't go in there and try to do too much, too fast. get that defense in line. He's got, Graham Harrell's a very good offensive coordinator. He brought a quarterback with him, Hudson Card from Texas, that he knows, right? That he knew, and he was a big recruit. So they're going to have enough talent there on offense, I think, to make some noise. And don't worry about what Jeff Brom did, and don't worry about the passing in the wide open offense. You do what you know is best. A lot like what they did at Illinois. I mean, Illinois, they were balanced and they threw it when they had to, but they played great defense.
Well, real quick, it's interesting what you said about running, that everyone's going to say run the ball, but they don't. I mean, Purdue, they actually had a pretty good running game last year with Devin Mockabee, but the last handful of years, they are clearly a pass-first offense.
Right.
If they are still a pass-first offense, can that work with the defense Ryan Walters wants to have on the other side of the field?
Oh, it has to do with your quarterback, I mean, Aiden O'Connell right now, I just talked to a guy at the Raiders last week. They love him.
Really?
He might have been a better quarterback than myself that people gave credit to.
Sure.
They like this guy. So if Hudson Card can come through at quarterback, they should be balanced, but I still think that they're going to be young enough and they've got to get more talent, across the board, that you don't want to get ahead of yourself. Keep things on the ground floor and build up from there.
So that brings us to our fourth coach, a very different situation for David Braun. He's in the interim position in Evanston with the ouster of Pat Fitzgerald as a head coach. I mean, I don't know what advice you would give to someone like this. This is a tough spot. I mean, morale has got to be a challenge all season long.
Yeah.
Add on to the fact they're coming off a one-win season last year.
Yeah, I'm pretty close to that situation for a couple of reasons. And I would tell David, I would say, the quickest way to get distracted, the quickest way to get defeated is to be distracted. And you're going to have distractions here. And somehow you've got to keep these players and assistant coaches focused on the game and keep the main thing, which is trying to win a football game, Mike, because it's not going to back off. It's going to continue. And you mentioned coaches, the tough thing when Fitz, I was up there in the spring, and they had, including David Brom, they had 5 new assistant coaches.
Right.
That's a lot. So now the coaches are just trying to get to know each other, work together, get the systems in line. The players are trying to do the same thing. Now you got the interim head coach, and you still have new assistant coaches, and then you got their families to deal. It's tough. I mean, everybody, is this a 4-month job? Should we start looking for jobs now? And players are going to do the same thing. Is this a place where we're going to be committed to, where we want to graduate from, or are we going to look to jump in the transfer portal?
Yeah.
And anytime you don't, particularly, at Northwestern, if you're not totally committed and all in, it's tough. The competition's too tough. So David's in a tough spot, and I wish him well. I mean, it's, and I know he'll do, and these coaches will do as good as they can, along with the players.
And it's such an amazing turnaround. I think where you were just a couple years ago, they won their division 2 out of 3 years, and then 2 years ago, they win 3 games. This past year, they win 1 game. Now they're longtime head coach. The winningest coach in program history is gone.
And they don't work under the same set of rules for the transfer portal.
Much harder for them.
Right? I mean, Northwestern will not accept all the credits from wherever, from Pitt. A kid wants to come to Pitt. They're going to look at it and say, we can't take those credits.
They can basically only get grad transfers.
Exactly.
Only get guys who've already finished their degree.
Where Missouri will take whoever.
All right.
They want.
Okay. All right. And with that, we're going to break. Dave, what's that? Dave's done for the show? Got it. Good to know. It's time for Gatorade's Big Stat, and we look at the leading receivers from last year. Chuck Sizzle, Charlie Jones, exploded in West Lafayette, 1,300 yards, but Marvin Harrison, Emeka Ibuka, Isaiah Williams, and Chimere DK are all guys who were in that top 10 and will be back this year. With that in mind, we're continuing our August-long trend of the Big Five, where we take a position on the football field and ask our analyst to give us his 5 best players as we enter this season. We will do wide receivers with you now, Dave. Going 5-1. At number 5, you're starting off with a guy at Illinois who actually wasn't a wide receiver until literally just a handful of months ago.
Yeah, Isaiah Williams, and I tell you, obviously he was very productive last year, on a football team that really was balanced, but with Chase Brown there last year, let's face it, if they could run the ball, they were going to run the ball, even though I was a big fan of Tommy DeVito, my guy. But Isaiah did a great job for him. He's coming back now. And now without Chase Brown there, I bring that up because I think that they may have to throw the football a little bit more. And if that's the case, they're going to need our guy here, Isaiah, to step up big, and I think he will.
You brought up in the last segment Missouri. Let me tell you about Missouri. That state gives out, like everyone does, a Gatorade Player of the Year. Isaiah Williams won it twice, as a senior and as a junior, as a quarterback.
Yes.
And he transitioned after a couple years in Champaign to being a wide receiver, and it has worked really well. He's become one of the more exciting wideouts in the game for sure. Number 4 is a guy that a lot of people are talking about. I haven't had a chance to really see, but he was a hot shot recruit, and he went to USC at first. Now he's in the Big Ten. Who is it?
That's C.J. Williams, and this kid is a young player. He played as a freshman, but didn't have much production at USC. And now he transfers, and he obviously ends up at Wisconsin. But the thing that's interesting about this guy, he comes out of Mater Dei High School, which is the high school in Southern California. They were 12-0. They were state champs. He had 12 touchdowns. I mean, this guy was as productive of any receiver. He's a top 100 receiver. That's why USC recruited him. I mean, you could see it. It wasn't just because he came from Mater Dei, a great high school. I mean, this kid was as productive as anybody. And, now he's going to be over there at Wisconsin, and he's probably looking at it, and they're going to be open. They're going to throw the ball and be balanced like we talked about. So it's a great opportunity for him.
He was one of the top 10 wide receivers in the country coming out of high school, went to USC, and now he's in that offense we were just talking about that is going to pass the ball more than we're used to seeing in Madison. All right, it's been Williams and Williams off the board. Number 3, you're picking another name that might surprise people. It's Dante Cephas at Penn State.
Yeah, I know a lot about this kid. Okay, he's a Pittsburgh kid. He went to the same high school as Aaron Donald, Penn Hills High School. And when he came out, he went to Kent State, and he started as a true freshman. Okay, at Kent State, the guy put up incredible numbers. I mean, last year, 82 catches, 1,200 yards, 1,200 plus yards, 13 touchdowns. And people say, well, why was this guy not? Well, he got rated as a 3-star recruit, and in a minute, 3-star recruit, maybe schools like that initially, Penn State and other schools, they shy away from them. We're only going to take those 4 stars and 5 stars. But this kid has been productive from day one. He played at a high level in high school, and he continued to do that. I think this is a really good sign. I really do.
And he's going to have some safety around him with a great offensive line, protecting the quarterback, giving him time to find the reads. 2 of the best running backs in the nation are both going to be wearing the blue and white for Penn State.
And you got to add, this kid graduated too. I mean, Dante's already have his degree. He's got his degree in his back pocket. So you're getting a mature kid here, and a kid that has been accountable, off the field as much as on the field. So it's a heck of a sign for Penn State.
For number 2, you're taking a Buckeye, Emeka Egbuka, and it's hard to not like this guy.
Well, you know what? I was studying him, and you know who he reminds me of a little bit? Curtis Samuel. Remember when Curtis Samuel came out of Ohio State? He was kind of I hate the term Swiss Army knife, but you can do a lot of things with them. If you see Samuel at Washington in the NFL now, they'll put him in the backfield, they'll throw him swing passes, he'll return kicks. That's exactly what we're describing right here. Okay, with Egbuka. I mean, he's got 2 rushing touchdowns. He's returned kickoffs. They've put him in the backfield. You can use him a lot of different ways, and he has a lot of talent. And when you get a player like this that's willing to do it, Mike, and has the ability to do it, wow, that brings a lot to the offense. And being a defensive coach, it puts a lot of stress on you when you have a player like this that can play 3 or 4 different spots and score from 3 or 4 different spots, and you never know where he's going to line up.
Top 10 in the country last year in receiving yards, and yet he's not the most talked about wide receiver on his team. I think Egbuka could have, statistically, maybe the best year of any wide receiver in the Big Ten, and part of that's because Your number one guy very well might be double teamed every single play, and that's Marvin Harrison Jr.
Well, Marvin Harrison Jr., he might be a Heisman Trophy candidate. I think we got to talk about him in terms like that. And, probably him and J.J. McCarthy. Big Ten should have two legitimate guys. The whole key, obviously, is going to be how does the quarterback position unfold? Is it going to be different? They're going to have C.J. Stroud had such a great year last year at Ohio State. Are they going to be able to successfully get him the football, give him opportunities? And then lastly, Mike, and maybe as important as anything, the last receiver, Devontae Smith, was the last receiver to win the Heisman. He played at Alabama. He had big numbers, 23 touchdowns, 1,800 yards. I think that Harrison, could have that type of year. I mean, he had 70-some last year, 14 touchdowns. So he's close. But the thing, Alabama won the national championship that year. Beat Ohio State in that game. So I think for a receiver, you
got to be on a great team.
Thank you.
Right.
Or a running back. There hasn't been a running back to win the Heisman unless he's been on a in modern era, unless he's been on a national championship team.
Right.
So it really is a situation where how well Ohio State does as a team is going to be a direct correlation on how much recognition as far as the Heisman. As far as being maybe the top receiver in the draft and all that, it's not going to have any bearing.
Right.
No bearing whatsoever. But I'm talking about just big picture. That's what we're talking now, going into this season with Marvin Harrison Jr.
Remember how talented Ohio State was last year. Remember how talented Georgia was last year. And when they played in the playoff game, Harrison was the best guy on the field.
Yep.
He got injured in that third quarter, and if that doesn't happen, Dave, who knows? I mean, that game came down to the wire, and Ohio State was playing without their best player the last 20 or so minutes.
Absolutely. No question about that. And the other thing about him is because his dad was such a great player, at the Colts and at Syracuse, he's been around enough training camps and all that, so he's not going to be affected. He's going to be getting great guidance from Ryan Day, but also from his family as far as what he has to do to keep improving at the position. So I think he's in a great spot right now.
He's one of those talents that you're like, we better appreciate that we get to watch him this year because
at 6'4", are you kidding me?
Yeah,
I mean, that's unusual.
Well, before Jennifer Klein took over Michigan soccer in 2018, the Wolverines hadn't won a Big Ten tourney title in more than 20 years. Well, 2 years ago, they did win the Big Ten tourney and one of the best seasons in program history. Jennifer is entering her 6th year as the head coach of Michigan women's soccer, and she's good enough to join us now here on Big Ten today. Jennifer, before we move on to the upcoming season, let's look back at last year. Bit of a struggle, certainly compared to the amazing season the year before. 7-8-3, the overall record. What can be learned from last year and brought into this year?
Yeah, I think, first off, thanks so much for having me. Always an honor and a pleasure to be on with you all. Yeah, I think a lot can be taken away from last season. I don't think it was for a lack of playing some good style of soccer. We just weren't able to score goals. And I think we took that, worked a lot in the off season, and hopefully we'll be able to score a few more goals. But we also now have a very young roster. So I think having some new faces, some new opportunity for some of our younger players that were with us last year will be a good change coming into this new season.
And some older players, too. 3 team captains this year, Sarah, Casey, and Sammy. Brag to me about them.
Yeah, they're unbelievable. I am very impressed with their overall leadership. We worked a lot in the off season on just developing leadership and trying to figure out, who those next captains were going to be, and their ability to create good relationships, especially with our younger incoming class, as we have a lot of them. I think I saw on your graphic, 14 newcomers. So they did a great job of establishing those relationships, bringing them in, getting them acclimated early, and ready to go for our quick preseason. And then, we start this week. But I also just, have to give a lot of credit to our other seniors, Steph Sparkowski, and our juniors, because they were definitely very helpful in getting those younger players ready to go.
When you took over at UNLV, you were the youngest coach in D1 women's soccer. What would you today tell that head coach taking over back then? Give me something you've learned.
I would say patience has been a big thing, and then also the value of I'll say the word failure, because I do think, with success comes some failure and adversity. And I look at, we had an unbelievably great season in 2021, but we didn't have a great 2020. And so now looking at last year, we didn't have a great 2022, but I'm hoping that lack of success is going to be a part of our process in our journey to success this season. So I would say patience, and then just embracing adversity and those small failures, and how they're part of the overall trajectory of success.
Well, let me ask you about the big news, the 4 West Coast schools coming into the Big Ten. How is that going to specifically affect your sport of women's soccer?
Well, I think what's really unique about women's soccer is we have every single sport, or every single school coming into the Big Ten has women's soccer. So every Big Ten now school will represent women's soccer, which I think is very unique to maybe some other sports. But also just the level of those teams. I think when you look at UCLA, USC, both of them, bringing in national championships, Oregon and Washington, 2 quality opponents as well. So I think it elevates and raises our Big Ten women's soccer league to an even higher level. So I think that part has been great. And I'm excited. We get a lot of West Coast players here to come to Michigan. So it's an opportunity within their 4-year cycle to know that they get a chance to go home and compete closer to in their state.
I know you haven't spent a ton of time thinking about it, but if someone were to say to you, hey, what should we consider when it comes to travel and making the schedule work out that way with those 4 new schools, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, just trying to have good balance between going out west and going to, the East Coast. I think now we're going to span across all the time zones. So I think just being really mindful of that. I do think because we're now going to be so spanned across the country, I think divisions might make most sense, just so that way, we don't have people traveling, back and forth. But, I think they have a lot of really smart and creative people to come up with something that I think will create some equity, some, equality across the schedule as best that they can. And then it's up to us just to go out and play it and do the best that we can.
Well, sure enough, your first game of the season this year is against one of those 4 in USC. That's happening on Thursday. What's the biggest key for the Wolverines in that match?
Yeah, I think a big thing is just not get too wrapped up in that it's USC. I think they definitely bring some weight behind their name. But I think for us, it's focusing on us and really continuing to use these early non-conference games to improve our style of play, get our young players some experience against some great opponents, but really just keep the focus on us.
Well, and then you're staying out west afterwards to play Pepperdine in a match on Sunday. What went into the idea of opening the season with a full weekend of West Coast trips?
Yeah, well, USC came out here in 2021, so we owed a return, and we figured, while we're there, we might as well play another great school and team. And I can't think of another better place than Malibu, California, as their field is in an unbelievable location, overlooks the ocean. So we thought it'd be a great preseason non-conference trip for us to play 2 great opponents, but also have a fun trip for some team bonding as well.
Yeah, Pepperdine's one of the incredible campuses in this country. It's really something special when you're out there.
Yeah.
Before we let you go, Jennifer, how are you going to know your team is playing their best soccer this season? What is it you have to see that will show you we're doing everything we can?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, if they're enjoying what we're doing, I think, if they're enjoying the style and they're enjoying the play, I think we're going to be playing at our best. And I also think, us not giving up a lot of goals and us scoring a lot of goals, I think will also be there. But I think a big thing is for them just to stay committed to the process, committed to just getting 1% better every single day, knowing that we're going to have a few moments of adversity, but that's all part of the process, I think will be key for us. But I think a big thing is just enjoying it will make us play at our very best.
Jennifer Klein, head coach of Michigan soccer. Thanks for your time. Best of luck this season and Thursday against USC.
Thank you very much, and go Blue.
The Huskies and the Ducks are in their last season in the Pac-12, and next year they will come on board to the Big Ten, joining USC and UCLA to make it 18 teams in the Big Ten for all sports, including, of course, football. And Dave, that news broke just a handful of days ago, and it was pretty fast. I mean, it went from like, people have been talking about this, maybe it might happen someday, to, hey, maybe it's happening, to it's done. What were your first thoughts when you found out about the news?
Well, Tony Petitti, our new commissioner, he didn't waste any time. I mean, I remember coaching in college where we couldn't get, it took years to get a word changed in a role, right? I mean, years, literally. Meetings, and now we're changing conferences overnight. And having coached at USC and competed against Oregon and Washington and UCLA, I'm pretty close to it. So I know the strength that the Big Ten. The one thing they did, they got the best of the best, and they all bring something, obviously athletically, to the table and academically. A lot of times it gets overlooked to say, Washington's got, they're fourth. When you talk about Rose Bowl victories, it's USC, Ohio State, Michigan, and then Washington.
Right.
So they're and then when you say academics in the Pac-12, you talk about Stanford and Cal, off the chart, and then you got USC and you've got UCLA and Washington. So academically, along with the football, Mike, they have been a top 20 team with draft picks and with football titles and so forth in that conference for a long, long time. We had to beat them when I was there. We had to go up and beat them to go to the Rose Bowl. Mm-hmm. And I remember going up in the crowd and it's going to be as good an atmosphere as any place that kids have played. It's a good deal.
And now the Big Ten is not just on the West Coast, which they were going to be next year with the LA schools, but now, they own it. Every massive brand college name on the West Coast is now a Big Ten. Those are the four biggest brand names. So what I think of is the recruiting angle. Like Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, they will recruit national kids. They will try to get kids from Washington, Oregon, California.
Absolutely.
And they have had them. It, in theory, would get easier now because the concept of playing your home teams. But also for those four schools on the West Coast, they now have that ability to not just still get their guys, but to say, you will be able to have people see you on road games too, because USC will be coming to Oregon and will be coming to Washington.
And everything in the way that with the NIL, the way it's moved, it's about your brand, right?
Right.
As a player. Well, now you're going to have a brand from Southern California to New Jersey and D.C. from where Maryland's at. So the Big Ten has obviously turned into the national conference right now in college football. And Oregon won't take a back seat. You look at, I was reading that there was like 10 teams in the last 10 years that basketball and football have won 70% of their games. Oregon's one of those teams.
Right.
So Oregon they've always been a very good football team, but they've really taken the next step in the last 10 years. And we can't, and one point here, when UCLA came in, they said, well, yeah, USC's got all the Heismans and the national championships, but UCLA doesn't have that many in football. I said, you got to look at the conference as a whole. All sports, men's, women's, minor sports, football. UCLA brings as much, they have more championships, I think, than the whole Big Ten conference put together at the one school. So and Oregon's kind of that way with the track and some of the running. They bring a lot to the table, I think, just from a total athletic program and academics, and it's you're getting the best of the best.
We did a show over the summer about football scheduling before these new moves were announced, and I thought it was a really smart way the conference handled it, where there were going to be certain teams that you would play every year. There's 11 protected rivalries, which make a ton of sense, and then you would have a grouping of teams you would play in a 2-year span, and every other year you would be guaranteed to play every team in the Big Ten. That won't be possible as long as they stay on a 9-game schedule starting next year. They're going to have to come up with a new plan. But it does make sense to me, those 4 West Coast schools now, make those your 3. If the same concept will move over to whatever the new scheduling is,
right,
you can make those 3 your permanent schedules because you have such a long history with them anyway.
Yeah, everybody's got to agree to eliminate, I think, non-Power 5 games.
Yeah.
That's what it's coming to, Mike, because it's really not fair for one team to play 8, one team to play 9, one team to play. I mean, that's not playing on a level playing ground. We know that. So they need to change that. I remember the days not that long ago where it was a debate where people were saying we cannot have a college football playoff,
right,
because the kids are going to miss school for a week, right?
Yeah.
Because they're going to have to travel and miss for a week. And these extra games that we might have, that we can't have that. And now look what it's come to. So the academics and the travels, I think what this is going to do, it's going to force is it an NCAA? I don't even know what the term is. It's going to force the presidents, university presidents, if you really want to help all sports and save financially with the travel, they almost need to take the entire country and just kind of divide it up into 4s. Well, that's the way I would do it.
There is a talk now that maybe down the line, maybe it's 10 years away, maybe it's less, is that football is its own thing and that you redo the conferences based on geography for all of the other sports. And if football is bringing in all the money and they want to have a game between Indiana and Washington, that's perfectly fine.
Right.
But it makes so much more sense for the Washington track team to, like you said, go to Boise State, right? Instead of having to go all the way. I don't know if that'll happen, but that's certainly being discussed.
Yeah, because football, I mean, let's face it, you'll fly out. I mean, even in the pros, we didn't have that many national trips when I was at Pitt or coaching, or even Miami. But when I coached the Miami Dolphins and we would play the Seattle Seahawks or we would play the Oakland Raiders back then, about as far as you can fly in our country, we would fly out the day before and we'd get up at 5 a.m. and, just, hey, that's part of the deal. Let's go play the game. And we would fly back. So it was a 2-day deal. So football teams can do that. And everybody complained. I complained. The players complained. Everybody complained, but we did it. But it was one team having to make the travel, and it was 2 days, and you deal with it and you go. But when and we only played back then 12 games a year,
right.
So I'm sorry, NFL
11.
16 games a year in the NFL. So you weren't doing it that much. But when you start taking college teams and you got to travel across the country, it's a whole different ball game. I personally think.
Well, and it's interesting to see. No one knows what's coming next, right?
Right.
No one really knows for sure. Florida State is barking as loud as they can that they want out of the ACC. There are 4 teams that are left over from the Pac-12 that are maybe going to merge with the Mountain West. Some of them have gotten sniffs from the ACC. There's talks that the American Conference might make some merger of some sort. I do feel like there are things that people always say, well, it's going to come down to this and that. Like, we don't know. Like, no, you thought the Big 12 might have been dead a year ago, and now it looks like arguably the number 3 conference in the country.
That's a good point. Everybody was talking about going to the Pac-12, right? And it was going to kill the Big 12. Now it's opposite. You're exactly right.
And this is what I think about the ACC, too. Like, people are talking about, people want out, and I get it, but their grant of rights deal makes it seem like they're locked in until 2036. But that's a lot of teams with a lot of history. Okay, maybe you're not the number 1 or number 2 conference. You're still an important, valuable conference as currently constructed.
Yeah, if Clemson and Florida State jump out of there, then that conference is scrambling. So it's going to happen. It's going to definitely happen. When and how, who knows?
Right. The details, no one's really been right on everything.
No,
for sure.
But it'll happen fast. If the last 2 years have been an indication, it's going to happen fast.
Well, that's what Nebraska's AD Trev Alberts was saying. He expects more to come, and it will be even more dramatic, according to what he thinks will be happening. So the Purdue Boilermakers are entering their first season with Ryan Walters as their head coach, returning 10 starters, mostly on offense. And as Dave mentioned earlier in the show, Hudson Card, who was a high recruit going to Texas a few years back, is now transferred over and is in West Lafayette and is expected to have the reins to the program this year. I want to start offensively with the Boilermakers because Hudson Card, again, very talented young man, not 100% proven. He didn't get a ton of snaps at Texas. He did get in some games, though. He's over here in a new system. Devin Mockabee is such an interesting guy. He was a walk-on last year, had 968 yards rushing, and when Walters became the head coach, one of the first things he did was put Mockabee on scholarship officially.
That was cool.
There are reasons to be excited about this offense this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking about a talented quarterback that does have some playing experience, and he's familiar with the offensive coordinator, Graham Harrell, so that'll all be good. That'll all be a good thing. I would just, and I really liked, what Ryan said at his press conference. He said, everybody's looking at what we did at Illinois defensively, but he says, what I've got to do and my assistant coaches have to do, we have to adjust our scheme to the talent that we have.
Right.
And I thought that was
a sign of a good coach, right?
That's a sign of a good coach. That's being smart, not being hard-headed. We're going to do exactly what we did at Illinois, and the players got to adapt to it. I mean, he sounded like, hey, we're evaluating everything we got, and we might not be as much man coverage because we don't have the two great corners maybe. Or maybe, I'm just talking general, that we had at Illinois. Or maybe we'll play more man, because we feel better. So I like his comments about being flexible that way and doing what the players can do to give you the best chance to win. Now, in the same token, like we said in the beginning of the show, you better make sure that you keep your focus on the defense. I mean, that would be the priority for me because that's been the inconsistent thing with their football team. Turnovers over the last couple of years, they'd had leads and they'd lose them at the end. So as a defensive head coach, keep your focus there, and the running game has to be a big part. If you want to help your defense, you have to have a good running game.
So the Purdue defense last year was 9th best in the Big Ten only, giving up around 27 points a game. And we mentioned Ryan Walters has this great track record of defenses in his years at Illinois and at Missouri before that. How much can one coach really improve a defense? Like, best case scenario, what is a realistic way to feel like the defense can get X amount better in just the first year of a new coach?
Well, credibility has a lot to do with it. I mean, he's going to go in there, and all these players know they're in the same conference, that they know how good Illinois was in defense, lead the entire country in scoring, right? We're the number one defense. So if he says something, they're going to listen. It's going to get their attention. And, so I think his reputation and what he's done and the coaches that are around him, that's going to get him off on the right foot, and the same thing on offense. I mean, he's got to come out on offense and not beat yourself. I mean, a lot of times, that can happen to teams. And I would tell Ryan this too. I would say, Ryan, when you look at the schedule, win the games that you're supposed to win. Don't go in there and say, this is the year. Yeah, okay, we went to the conference last year, but you know what, guys? We're conference champs and we're going to beat, we're going to win the conference again. I wouldn't go that far. I really wouldn't. I would say, hey, let's just take them one at a time. And as a first-year head coach, win the games you're supposed to. And then you'll get those signature wins down the road.
The first game for Ryan Walters is Fresno State. In a game
which won't be easy. You got to be careful on that one.
You can see that game on BTN. Speaking of BTN, have you ever been in this situation where a friend's in your office and he just sees a bag of pistachio nuts and just opens it up and just starts eating? He doesn't ask him. He just eats the nuts and then walks out of the office. Have you ever had that happen?
No.
Okay, because I did.
Who would ever do that?
I had that happen today with you.
Oh, come on. You're from Missouri. Guys, you need friends. You gotta have.
Well, that's true.
When I walked in your office, you were just so excited to talk.
Oh my gosh, I was like a human? A real boy talking to me?
I gotta say, when I said, where's Mike's office? It took me the third time asking somebody before they said it's down there on the left.
Yeah, most of them were like,
never had that problem with Revson.
Mike who? Are you sure you're in the right place?
You're my man.